America's first lighthouse was named the Boston Light, and it celebrated its 300th anniversary in 2016. The original tower was built in 1716 and lasted until the War of 1776, when the British bombed it and destroyed it. It was rebuilt back into the same position, and it looks similar today to what it did back then, except today it's fully automated. Back in 2016, a lady by the name of Sally Snowman, yes, that's her name, operated the lighthouse, but her role was different than what it was 300 years ago. 300 years ago, it was the duty of the lighthouse person to keep it lit, and today she operates it in several different ways. That is, she gives tours, maintains the ground, and manages the 90 volunteers to keep the region of that landscape kept up. 300 years, 70 lighthouse keepers. Now, the lighthouse itself, we can say, is a representative of faithfulness. That except for the time that it was bombed, it was rebuilt, and therefore it stood there for that 300 years. The lighthouse keepers, on the other hand, 70 lighthouse keepers over 300 years, only averages out to 4 years and 3.4 months per lighthouse keeper. And I'm sure some stayed longer, some were shorter, but considering how many years the lighthouse has stood, that's not very many, or that's way too many lighthouse keepers. So we can say that the lighthouse has been faithful, lighthouse keepers not so much. And this morning we conclude with the book of Joshua, so we're going to skip a whole bunch of chapters. And today we're looking at a life well lived. Now, if you remember last week, we saw Joshua had made a giant oops. The Israelites were not to make any treaties with the people of Canaan. They were to annihilate them, to destroy them. And the Gibeonites tricked Joshua into signing a treaty, and not only just that, but to protect them. An alliance with them, you might say, of sorts. He hadn't gone to God. And when the other inhabitants, the other kings of the land of Canaan, found out that the Gibeonites had betrayed them, they came to attack the Gibeonites. And then the Gibeonites called on Joshua and said, "Hey, you made this treaty with us. Come on, show up." And he did, and he defeated the 5 kings. So the rest of the book of Joshua is a bunch of wars. It's how did the Israelites defeat the people of the land of Canaan and so forth. So we're going to skip all that, and we're going to go to the end of the book. So with the region in the hands of the Israelites, this land that God had promised to their great, great, great ancestor, Abraham, the father of the Israelites, Joshua's role as a military leader was complete. And so we turn to the end of chapter 23 of Joshua and pick up the reading with verse 14 as Joshua addressed the Israelites' people. He says, "Now I am about to go the way of all the earth. You know with all your heart and soul that not one of all the good promises the Lord your God gave you has failed. Every promise has been fulfilled. Not one has failed. But just as all the good things the Lord your God has promised you have come to you, so he will bring on you all the evil things he has threatened, until the Lord your God has destroyed you from this good land he has given you. If you violate the covenant of the Lord your God, which he commanded you, and go and serve other gods and bow down to them, the Lord's anger will burn against you, and you will quickly perish from the good land he has given you." Joshua lived a life of faithfulness. It didn't just happen. He had to work at it through the years. We're introduced to Joshua in the book of Exodus, way back when they were still in the land of Egypt. Joshua would become a mentee of Moses, and of course Moses was his mentor. Moses led the people out of Egypt and through the wilderness for those 40 years. He was a spiritual leader to them, not just a leader to take them out, but also a leader to bring them to God. And he was their spiritual leader. Joshua also was a godly leader, but not in the same way that Moses was, because Joshua was Moses' military leader under Moses. Joshua led the battles. He was a military leader. I don't think we can call Joshua a spiritual leader. He was a military leader. Now, both had relationships with God. God spoke with Moses as a friend speaks to a friend. Now we find that in Exodus 33:11. Joshua also spoke with God and God with Joshua, but it doesn't describe it in the same way. So there's a little bit difference in the relationship there. Moses was the spiritual leader. Joshua was the military leader. They both led in similar roles. Both were godly men, but a little bit different. But as Joshua has led the Israelites to take control of the land, the one aspect that he and the Israelites failed to do was they were supposed to have annihilated all the Canaanites, and they did not do that as God commanded them. There were still pockets of Canaanites in the land, but they still had subdued them. In other words, the Canaanites were under submission. So when we come to the time of Joshua's life, that he realizes his job is done. Not only that, it appears that his age has caught up with him also. His concern was no longer for himself, it was for the Israelite people. And that's where this is going this morning. He cares about what's going to happen to the Israelites once he's gone. Would they stay faithful to God as a nation? Would they follow God as a people in faithfulness? So to help guide the people, Joshua gave his wisdom to them. Go to chapter 24 of Joshua, verse 14. He says, "Now fear the Lord and serve him with all faithfulness. Throw away the gods your ancestors worshipped beyond the Euphrates River and Egypt, and serve the Lord. But if serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, then choose for yourself this day whom you will serve. Whether the gods your ancestors served beyond the Euphrates, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you are living. But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord." Joshua gives them a brief history of their ancestors, from the time even going back before Abraham came from his land to the land of Canaan that God would eventually give to them. Those generations, many of them had served idols, pagan gods, and so forth. And Joshua says, okay, they've done that. Don't you end up doing that. And then he ends up by saying, but for me and my household, we're going to serve God. We're going to stick with God, the one true living God, the only God. See, Joshua was a man of faith. He lived it. He demonstrated and he declared it in this statement. Are we so bold to declare this statement? Are we so bold as to say we will serve God? Us and our household will serve God. So we're going to do something a little bit differently this morning, so it's still on the screen. So let's say this. If you're committed to this, let's say it together. 1, 2, 3, go. But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord. Okay, now we got it. Let's do it one more time. 1, 2, 3, go. But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord. There you go. And there was a dialogue that took place, and that's what we're going to read next in verse 16. Then the people answered, "Far be it from us to forsake the Lord to serve other gods. It was the Lord our God himself who brought us and our parents up out of Egypt from that land of slavery. And the Lord drove out before us all the nations, including the Amorites who lived in the land. We too will serve the Lord because he is our God." Joshua said to the people, "You are not able to serve the Lord. He is a holy God. He is a jealous God. He will not forgive your rebellion and your sins. If you forsake the Lord and serve foreign gods, he will turn and bring disaster on you and make an end of you after he has been good to you." But the people said to Joshua, "No, we will serve the Lord." Then Joshua said, "You are witnesses against yourselves that you have chosen to serve the Lord." "Yes, we are witnesses," they replied. "Now then," said Joshua, throw away the foreign gods that are among you and yield your hearts to the Lord, the God of Israel. And the people said to Joshua, we will serve the Lord our God and obey him. Now let's pause for a bit. Did you catch what Joshua said? Throw away the foreign gods that are among you. The people said, we're going to serve God. We are serving God. And Joshua said, no, there's some among you that are not serving God. Now, I don't know whether this was the people standing before him or this was just the leaders, but Joshua was saying, there's idol worship here. There's some of you that still have idols. Whether it was those exact people he was talking to or some others, but there was idol worship in the land already, and Joshua did not let them get away with that. We pick up in verse 25. On that day, Joshua made a covenant for the people, and there at Shechem he reaffirmed them decrees and laws. And Joshua recorded these things in the book of the law of God. Then he took a large stone and set it up under the oak near the holy place of the Lord. See, he said to all the people, this stone will be a witness against you. It has heard all the words the Lord has said to us. It will be a witness against you if you are untrue to your God. Then Joshua dismissed the people, each to their own inheritance. Joshua's concern for the people was as the concern that you and I need to have for the church today. See, it's far easier to declare obedience to God than to live in submission to him. It's far, far easier to declare obedience to God than to live in submission to him. If you read into Joshua's statement what he was saying, he knew what was coming. He knew they were going to turn away. He knew they would turn to false gods and serve them. They would eventually drift away. And we live in an age where we can see that. We look back on the Israelites in the Old Testament. We see how they drifted away. And when we go to the next book that follows this one, the book of Judges, it's really evident how they would drift away from God. We see this in people around us. We see this in our own nation. We see this in our neighbors, and you've probably lived it yourself also. Times of drifting, times that you've gone away from God, gotten a little bit lax in things until God brought you back by something that happened, or maybe you came back on your own. It's easy to declare obedience to God. Do we love God? Do we really, really love him? I believe that we do. I really do believe that. You can declare it with certainty. We can almost feel God's heartbeat at times in the service, especially with the songs and things that go on, or ways that God touches us. We are strong as a unit. This is one reason we come together as a church, because we are strong as a unit. It recharges our batteries, and we get filled up again. And sometimes we just drag ourselves in, and hopefully something comes of the service that would make us feel better and come out in boldness. And then we walk out into the real world, and what happens? It all seems to change. We lack some of that confidence, and we get tempted by Satan. Just you remember, Satan back in the Garden of Eden, everything is perfect. And then Satan comes to Eve and says, hey, Eve, you want to be like God? You want to have this kind of wisdom? Eat the fruit. Eat the fruit. It'll open your eyes. And so Eve ate it. But Satan tells us the same thing today. For example, you've made a terrible mistake. You look bad. And you don't like looking bad. I don't like looking bad. And so Satan says, eat the fruit. Eat the fruit. Don't admit it. Don't admit you made a mistake or blame somebody else. It's okay. Somebody shames us. And we know we should keep our mouth shut. Satan says, go ahead, eat the fruit. Eat the fruit. It tastes so good. It feels so good. And we go ahead and cut the other person down. We fight back. We need to look good to our boss. We need to a little bit of prestige. We need something there to make ourselves look at job security. And Satan says, eat the fruit. Eat the fruit. Take credit for somebody else's work. It's okay. See how we eat the fruit? Satan tempts us, makes it look so good, and we take a bite of the forbidden fruit. it comes back to haunt us. Now we go to 1 Kings. We read of a person that talks about Solomon's kingdom. 1 Kings chapter 11, verse 1. King Solomon, however, loved many foreign women besides Pharaoh's daughter, Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Sidonians, and Hittites. They were from nations about which the Lord had told the Israelites, "You must not intermarry with them, because they will surely turn your hearts after their gods." Nevertheless, Solomon held fast to them in love. He had 700 wives of royal birth and 300 concubines, and his wives led him astray. As Solomon grew old, his wives turned his heart after other gods, and his heart was not fully devoted to the Lord his God, as the heart of David, his father, had been. Now, previously we learned in the Bible how great Solomon was, all this wisdom, everything that he had. This passage is not about discrediting women. It's about Solomon's sins. You see, the grains of sand grind slowly at our resistance to sin. The grains of sand grind slowly at our resistance to sin. Solomon had all this glory, and he didn't just wake up one day and say, "That's it, I've had it with God. I'm going to worship all these pagan gods." Maybe it happens like that to some people. That's not the way that Satan works. See, grains of sand are detrimental. Grains of sand are tiny. They almost seem insignificant in the moment. We figure that in the gears, if we hear the grinding, we'd just throw a little bit more grease at the grains of sand and make the gears, it makes them sound smoother. We don't hear that noise anymore. But grease does not remove the grains of sand. Actually, grease can make the grains of sand stick better in the gears. Grease can sometimes attract other dirt and filth and actually eat more away at the gears. Solomon's faith disintegrated over the years. It was slowly. Solomon's reign, he loved these pagan wives and these concubines. And slowly over time, he started worshiping their gods. He enjoyed their kind of worship. He enjoyed being with those wives. And they led him astray. Maybe he thought he could handle the temptations. I'm strong. I'm wise. I know I'm not doing right, but I can handle this. I can stay faithful to God. And he eventually fell like a great giant redwood in the forest. With a crash, he came down. Maybe he realized what was going on and he didn't care. Maybe he never understood what was happening until it was too late. See, Satan is cunning. Satan is sneaky. He's deceiving. He can make things look beautiful. He can look beautiful. But he's not. Peter tells us in his letter, 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 8, it says, "Be alert and of sober mind. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. Resist him, standing firm in the faith, because you know that the family of believers throughout the world is undergoing the same kind of sufferings." Now, did you catch that? Everyone's gone through the same kind of things. Every Christian in the world is getting deceived, or Satan's trying to deceive them. And Peter says, hang firm. I like to watch wildlife videos on social media. I think it's, I can't say neat because it's grueling. You've got this beautiful tiger or beautiful leopard, and it's prowling along, and it sees a gazelle or some animal that looks delicious to it. And it sneaks in on the camera, and you could see it crouching down until finally it pounces. It grabs the animal, sinks its claws into it, and then takes a bite at the throat, either to sever the jugular or to suffocate the animal. And the animal succumbs to it. Now, we're not going to show a video like that this morning because I know that going out, several of you would say that's inappropriate. So we're not going to show you, but maybe we should show you that. Because that is the exact description of what Satan does to us. We're going through life. He comes beautiful to us. He makes things look so tempting and so beautiful. And we slowly fall for it. Until finally, he sinks his claws into us. And we realize it was a trap and we've succumbed to it. And if we don't get out of it by the power of Jesus, Satan severs our jugular or suffocates us, and we fall away from Christ. Are we succumbing to Satan and his evil ways? When you continue into the book of Judges, as I said, we see how this happened time after time after time. The children of Israel gave in to Satan, gave in to his I can't think of the right word, that he tempts us and says, this looks so beautiful, and the people fell for it, and then Satan sank his claws into them. We go to the end of chapter 24 of Joshua, read this last few verses. After these things, Joshua son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died at the age of 110. And they buried him in the land of his inheritance at Timnath-Serah, in the hill country of Ephraim, north of Mount Gaish. Israel served the Lord throughout the lifetime of Joshua and of the elders who outlived him, and had experienced everything the Lord had done for Israel. Israel fell away. It didn't happen overnight. During Joshua's lifetime, they served him. They had a religious leader, a Christian, I shouldn't say a Christian leader, a godly leader. And they followed Joshua's footprints. The priests, the elders, the people obeyed and they stayed faithful. Even after Joshua died, they stayed faithful until that generation of leaders died. And over time, they turned away. Over time, they left the Lord their God and became faithless, not faithful. They fell from their faithfulness. According to an article in space.com from June of 2021, the first footprints on the moon are likely to remain there for a long, long, long time. Neil Armstrong's walk on the moon, those footprints today look as they did at the very time that he had stepped there. But see, there's no atmosphere influences on the moon. There's no wind erosion. There's no water erosion. So things last seemingly forever. But there is something on the moon that's different. A stream of charged particles coming from the sun do change things. Now, if an asteroid hits it, of course, that's an instant change. But those footprints are going to remain there until these charged particles of dust, whatever it is, start changing things. So in other words, in our generation, in our children's generation, even the grandchildren's generation, if we could look at those footprints, they would look the same as they did when Neil Armstrong walked on the moon. But if we could come back 1 million years from now, or maybe even 10 million years from now, then we would see the change. Compare the photos back then with the photos 1 million years from now, they'd look different. Change so slowly that seem insignificant to us, but it is changing. And that's how Satan works with us, although it doesn't take millions of years, or even 1,000 years, or even 100 years. But it might take place over 1 year, or 5 years, or 10 years. And if we don't stay faithful like Joshua stayed faithful, we will start to drift. Our faithfulness can become faithlessness. And we're going to fall prey to Satan if we don't stay faithful. So, the question is today, who are you like? Who am I like? Are we going to be faithful like Joshua? Or are we going to become faithless like the Israelites back in those days? We don't know. I don't know where I'm going to be at 5 years from now. Will I be faithful? You don't know where you're going to be at 5 years from now. It takes work. It takes faithfulness because our attitudes can change because Satan works at us so slowly. We need to live by that resolve to stay faithful to God. We have to. So we can say, as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord. As for me and my household, we will serve the Lord day by day, hour by hour, minute by minute. Let's pray. Almighty Father in heaven, it's a strange walk that we walk with you because Satan is so subtle. He's so deceitful. Even those that say they will remain faithful can lose their faithfulness. Not because you take it away, but because we can drift away. So Father, help us to resolve this statement of Joshua. As for me and my household, we will serve you, God. We will stay faithful. Yeah, we may have troubles. We will sin. But bring us back and help us to resolve that we will come back to you and remain faithful till the day that we die and meet Jesus Christ in heaven. In His name we pray. Amen.